Physical changes, such as a new haircut, a change in wardrobe, maybe styling difference, or even going on medical leave can become subjects of discussion. And let's not forget media presence. Being featured in the media, whether positively or negatively, may also elicit a reaction from clients.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, and today I'm going to talk about self-disclosure in clinical work. In the realm of therapeutic practice, the subject of self-disclosure remains a topic fraught with divergent opinions and practices. For clinicians, self-disclosure isn't merely a binary choice of to share or not to share. Rather, it's a nuanced decision-making process that has far-reaching implications for the therapeutic relationship. Depending on a therapist's training, theoretical orientation, treatment modality, and personal stance, perspectives on self-disclosure can range widely. Yet what often goes unconsidered are the multiple facets of self-disclosure, each with its unique sets of advantages, disadvantages, and ethical considerations. So let's explore two types of self-disclosure, voluntary and involuntary, as well as delve into the clinical and ethical considerations, practical examples, and the pros and cons associated with each. So let's start with voluntary self-disclosure. Most of us know exactly what that is. Voluntary self-disclosure occurs when a therapist consciously opts to share personal information with a client, usually after assessing the potential therapeutic benefit and the potential shift that could happen in the client-therapist dynamic. Deliberately sharing personal experiences can foster a more robust connection, leading to a stronger therapeutic alliance. It also normalizes experiences. Anecdotes or personal accounts can serve as potent tools to normalize and validate the client's emotional struggles. We see this very often with populations where the therapist is working with a population of people that has a shared aspect of their own life, and their connection with these clients can be enhanced by self-disclosure by allowing the clients to see that the therapist has a personal perspective on the things that they're working on in therapy. Cons of voluntary self-disclosure are that you could have a boundary violation risk. There's always the potential danger that sharing too much can blur professional boundaries and make the session more about the therapist than the client. And there's also potential for confusion. Misrepresentation of disclosed information could set the therapy back or cause complications. It also can muddy the boundary issues in the therapeutic relationship. So let's look at some examples. Let's look at eating disorder recovery. A therapist who has successfully recovered from an eating disorder might choose to disclose this to a client struggling with similar issues to instill hope and offer living proof that recovery is attainable. Cultural background. A therapist might disclose their own cultural background when working with a client from a similar culture, aiming to foster a deeper, more nuanced understanding between them. Shared identity. A therapist who identifies as LGBTQ may disclose this when working with clients facing identity-related mental health issues, potentially making the therapeutic setting feel like a safer space for the client. And this can be any type of shared identity. It can be about neurodivergence, other types of recovery. All of those things fall under this category. Mental health history. Discussing one's own experience with mental health can be empowering for the client, but it can also shift focus away from them. So you want to be cautious with this. With spiritual beliefs, while sharing spiritual views can offer a sense of shared community or values, it could also risk alienating those with different beliefs. And sometimes our clients are going to want to know what our beliefs are. And so it's important to know ahead of time what and when you might choose to disclose that. And the same goes for political beliefs. So there's been typically what we see is an evolution of perspective around this topic. Clinicians who've been practicing for years often admit that their views on voluntary self-disclosure have evolved. It's not a static concept, but a technique that gets refined over time, and it varies from client to clinician in lots of different ways. Now we're going to look at involuntary self-disclosure, and this is not something that we look at often enough. Involuntary self-disclosure can happen subtly, often unintentionally. It might involve physical or environmental clues that the client observes, leading to assumptions or questions about the therapist's life. For example, a growing belly is likely a good sign you are pregnant or having something going on with your body. And that's not something you are necessarily choosing to disclose, but your physical appearance is involuntarily disclosing this for you. The pros of this is natural engagement. Spontaneous disclosures can lead to authentic conversations that enhance the therapeutic relationship. And there's also modeling opportunities. Handling involuntary disclosures gracefully can serve as adaptive coping models for clients. But there are some cons. There's the potential for distraction. Such disclosures can at times divert the session's focus from the primary therapeutic goals. You also have misinterpretation risk. Without a frame of reference, clients may make incorrect or unsettling assumptions. So let's look at some specific examples. Office changes. You might have a new office set up, and that can elicit questions that turn into a session topic. Years ago, I was moving from one group practice to another, and there were lots and lots of questions about what my new office was going to look like. Was it going to have the same color paint? Would it have the same couch? What were the things that were going to be similar? And so this is a little off topic for what we're discussing here, but just be aware that these are all things that are impactful to our clients. Let's look at visible tattoos and scars. Such physical features might spark curiosity or lead to assumptions. Years ago, when I got a tattoo, it sparked a lot of conversation with my clients that I really wasn't prepared for, but learned very quickly I needed to be. Remote backgrounds. And this is for traveling therapists. Changes in your remote session background can attract client inquiries. One of the ways traveling therapists manage this is by having a virtual background so the background looks the same all the time. As I mentioned earlier, physical changes such as a new haircut, a change in wardrobe, maybe styling difference, or even going on medical leave can become subjects of discussion. And let's not forget media presence. Being featured in the media, whether positively or negatively, may also elicit a reaction from clients. Of course, there's also sharing on social media, which is really a topic unto itself. And more recently, there has been discussion about whether a therapist should have an OnlyFans account. And this is also a topic that could use a lot of exploration and be a standalone topic. So for involuntary self-disclosure, let's look at some considerations. You may choose to share some or all of the details, or you may choose not to. In either case, it's helpful to come up with specific language around your decision so you don't have to figure it out on the spot. For example, early in my career, I got a very different haircut than I had previously had and was wholly unprepared for the deluge of comments and opinions I received from clients. I very quickly realized that this is not something that we needed to be wasting session time on, so I came up with a succinct statement and then just moved us on to the focus being on the client. I've had wardrobe choices at times that have fallen into that same category. I once had someone say, "What carpet did that dress get cut from?" And I was not prepared for that. And afterwards, there were so many therapeutic ways I could have gone with that, but not being prepared for that, I probably just moved on from that as quickly as I can. But on the upside, no matter how you handle these situations, it might be an indicator that you've developed trust with the client, and there can be lots of therapeutic value in how you respond. There are benefits to the client. Therapists who opt for voluntary self-disclosure usually do so after careful evaluation of how it will benefit the client's treatment. Perhaps it will enhance rapport, offer a different perspective, or validate the client's experience. And then there's the impact on the relationship. It's crucial to recognize that self-disclosure can change the dynamics of the therapist-client relationship. The sharing of personal information could either strengthen the therapeutic alliance or introduce a power imbalance, so you want to be aware of that. There's situational variables to be considered as well. These can be client-specific. The decision to disclose may vary depending on the individual client's needs, the specific therapeutic situation, and even the stage of therapy. For instance, self-disclosure might be more appropriate in long-term psychotherapy than in short-term crisis intervention. And then there's some ethical frameworks to consider. Always consult your ethical guidelines and possibly a supervisor or consultation group when in doubt. Certain ethical and theoretical frameworks may discourage self-disclosure, while others might offer strategies for its effective use. Let's look at some navigational strategies. We want to start with preparation. Given that involuntary self-disclosures are inevitable to some extent, preemptive thinking can be invaluable. Prepare some language around how you wish to address these instances so that you aren't caught off guard. For example, consult with colleagues. Discuss potential involuntary disclosures and your planned responses with your peers. Their insights might fortify your confidence in your decision or encourage you to take an alternative approach. This is also something that therapists in my consultation groups have discussed at times and gotten consult from their peers. For example, someone who had to cancel clients due to a family emergency is now feeling anxious about the questions that their clients are going to ask and how to move forward through that. So talking that through with a consultation group can help them formulate what their response is going to be. And I always suggest that they come up with something succinct that they memorize and that it's just top of mind, that they can just come right on out if that comes up. And then we should consider ongoing assessment. As you navigate these instances, it's crucial to elevate how things are proceeding. Unexpected client reactions may prompt you to reconsider your initial stance or the way you convey your message. Consultation groups or one-on-one peer discussions can be a helpful sounding board here as well. So the guiding principle with both of these types of self-disclosure is therapeutic value. The self-disclosure is not an end in itself, but a means to enrich the therapeutic relationship. Navigated with caution and forethought, both voluntary and involuntary self-disclosures offer unique challenges and opportunities. A trick that I use when I'm considering self-disclosure is I pause and think, is this something that the client is going to benefit from hearing, or is this something that we have in common and I just want to share it? Obviously, the former is the situation where we would want to share it. If we're talking about the latter example, it's just something that we have in common that I want to share. I really need to rethink that because the therapy is about the client. So consider the type of involuntary disclosure you may be experiencing and how you plan to respond. When you run it by your colleagues, they may have input you find helpful, which can either help you feel confident in your decision or help you decide you want to handle it in a different way. It's hard to do this work in a vacuum, so if you don't have colleagues to bounce things off of, you should consider ways to meet other therapists and or join a clinical consultation group. After a few encounters with this response that you've determined that you're going to use with clients, assess how it's going. If you get unanticipated responses, you may need to rethink your position or how you are conveying the information. And then the ethical frameworks, which are the underpinnings of our practice. It's essential to recognize the overarching ethical frameworks that govern mental health professionals. Both the American Psychological Association and the National Association of Social Workers stipulate that the welfare of the client is of paramount importance. These ethical codes underscore the need to do no harm and to consider the potential impact of any actions, including self-disclosure, on the client's well-being. Let's look at some proactive strategies for ethical practice. As we discussed earlier, preemptively thinking about potential self-disclosures and how you might handle them ethically and therapeutically is going to be very helpful. You might also want to consider an ethical consultation. Engage in peer consultation or supervision to ensure that your approaches align with professional ethical guidelines when it comes to self-disclosure. In conclusion, the realm of self-disclosure in therapy is inherently complex, replete with both opportunities for deepening the therapeutic relationship and risks that might hinder therapeutic progress. However, with careful planning, ethical considerations, and peer consultation, self-disclosure can be a potent tool in a clinician's arsenal. By continually assessing its impact and preparedness for unplanned scenarios, therapists can better navigate this intricate aspect of client work, keeping the therapeutic relationship both meaningful and effective. I hope this discussion has brought some clarity to you about the types of self-disclosure that we encounter in our work. For everyone listening, there are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.